The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and thanks again for joining us for our 3dcart Partner Spotlight webinar. To briefly introduce myself for those of you who may be new to our webinars, my name is Henry Suarez and I'm the 3dcart Product Manager, where I do my best to educate our users on the different facets of 3dcart and the different partnerships we offer. One of the ways we do this is through our Partner Spotlight webinars, just like this one. Now, today's webinar is being presented by the team at BongoCheckout. I'll be acting as moderator to help with the question and answer session at the end of today's presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the question pane of the GoToMeeting interface. It should be over to the right-hand side of your screen. At the end, we'll have a brief Q&A, and we'll do our best to get you answers as we read off the questions. Okay, so on to today's presentation. As I mentioned, today we have with us the team from BongoCheckout. Now, I've been working with e-commerce hosting for quite a few years now, and I've always noticed that one of the most, I guess you can say, anxious moments for merchants, especially when they're first starting out, is when that first international order comes through. There's a lot of questions that run through someone's mind when they see that order. How do I know it's a valid order? What if it's fraudulent? Can I ship there legally? What are the customs regulations? Did I charge enough for shipping? What do I do if they want to return the merchandise? Questions like these have honestly kept a lot of merchants from even entertaining the idea of shipping internationally. This is where a service like BongoCheckout can help. So with us today are Greg Sack, President of Sales for Bongo International, and Greg Unger, Bongo International's Product Manager. They'll be telling us a little bit about the service and how it can help address these and other questions merchants face when offering their wares abroad. So guys, welcome to the Partner Spotlight, and thanks for joining us today. It's all yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Henry. And this is Greg Sack, President of Sales at Bongo. We're certainly excited to be working with Henry and with this new integration within 3dcart, really hoping to be able to leverage a lot of the current traffic that is hitting your sites today from international visitors and hopefully being able to turn them all into paying customers. So the goal of this meeting, as Henry stated, is to give you a little bit of an overview about BongoCheckout specifically, which is the application that we designed for 3dcart, and give you a little bit more details as to how that integration works. And then we'll, I'm sure, have a bunch of questions at the end that we'll be able to answer and spend some time doing some Q&A. So without further ado, we'll get into the presentation itself. So a little bit about Bongo. We started the organization in 2007, and we've grown extremely rapidly since that time. We currently operate with a multilingual staff speaking a total of 10 different languages, and we've been able to build up a kind of a book of business of over 2,000 merchants that are using one of our many services. We've expanded from an operational perspective, not only in our original location in Bridgeport, Connecticut, but we also have a facility in Florida, a facility in Carson, California, and then we also have expanded ourselves over into Europe this year. So July 1st, we opened up a facility in Belgium, specifically in Brussels, where we're able to duplicate our model over there. We also have a facility down in Peru, which will eventually be our capability of duplicating the model down into South America. It will also allow us to leverage shipping costs to those areas of the world as well. Rather than having to ship everything via ocean, we'll eventually have the ability to ship these products via ocean, which might be a longer transit, but for folks who sell larger product, will be significantly more cost-effective for those international consumers. So here's just kind of an overview of BongoCheckout, and what this application can do for your business. It's really designed to help you transact those orders of those consumers that are already hitting your site. We have the ability to ship and sell these products to 222 countries. And the benefit is that the customer gets full landed cost calculation at the time that they're checking out. So what does that mean? That really means that there is no question marks as to what the cost will be for the consumer. They're able to see what the cost of the items are, what the shipping costs are going to be, and what the duties and taxes are going to be. And it's designed in a fashion where they get a localized experience in checkout. They're able to see, and we'll go through in a little bit more detail what those components are, but they'll be able to see their own currency, they'll be able to see their own language, they'll have multiple payment options that they have the capability of checking out through, rather than just simply credit cards. From the merchant's perspective, fraud is obviously a very large challenge when selling to international consumers, simply because of the fact that there's not the same fraud measures put in place with international destinations as there are within the U.S. and the way that the U.S. credit card companies handle those transactions with address verification and things of that nature. So it's a huge benefit to each merchant to be able to get each of these orders as a guaranteed order, no worry about any sort of fraudulent transactions being placed. Every single order comes through your system as a domestic payment. So it's a U.S. dollars paid for by Bongo directly. From an operational perspective, every order gets shipped domestically. So when these orders enter your system, they won't be entered into your system as an international order. They actually get entered in as a domestic order. So Bongo will, in essence, become one of your, if not your largest customer, certainly one of your largest customers. We handle all of the compliance. We handle all of the paperwork or the more complex aspects once that item or items have arrived to our facility, and we ship those products overseas on your behalf. And the beauty of doing this within 3dcart is that the setup within 3dcart is very simple. And we'll go through what that actually looks like here in a minute. So here's a simple process flow just to help everybody understand what the concept looks like and where these customers move from and how do they move through the flow chart, if you will. So within your own checkout, the customer is going to select a international customer button. So international customers click here to pay, very similar in nature to Google Checkout or to a PayPal, and they move over into really a Bongo's environment, which is going to be designed to look exactly like your website. So we use your logos, we use your color schemes, everything about your current checkout process is duplicated over on this Bongo checkout. So the design is not to make it look like Bongo, but to make it look like you as the merchant. Once they land on our checkout, we're going to be posting this duty and tax request so that the customer is able to get that full landed cost immediately. And they make that purchase through the checkout, and we inject those orders, again, as a domestic purchase directly into your order management system. So, and all this is done through an automated fashion through 3dcart. Once you receive that order, it gets accepted into your system, and you ship the product domestically. What's unique here is that once that domestic tracking number is submitted, we are updating what's called a unified tracking number. And that's what was already provided to the consumer at the point in time that they completed checkout. They get this unified tracking number, and it allows them to track the shipment from your facility or from, if you use drop shippers, from their facility to Bongo's consolidation location, which will very likely be Connecticut, and then ultimately to their destination. And what's unique about this unified tracking number is that you might use UPS to ship the product to us, and we may use FedEx to ship the product overseas, or we may use DHL to ship the product overseas, but the consumer is seeing one tracking number. So they don't get confused. They're able to see the entire flow, process flow of that order, again, from its origin to its door. Once those orders are received, we process them. We handle, again, all of the paperwork. If there's any certificates of origins that need to be filled out, Bongo's handling all of that on your behalf. And we're ensuring that no product ever goes overseas that can't go overseas. If there's any sort of restrictions, whether it's a licensing requirement, or even if you have any brand restrictions, certain brands that you can't sell internationally, we can stop those both at the checkout as well as at our facility. And we handle, obviously, the transportation to get it directly to the consumer's door. So the shopping environment itself, what does it look like? What's this process flow going to look like? This is just kind of a sample store within 3dcart that's created. As you can see, you typically have your continue shopping, update cart, and proceed to checkout button. What you're going to have now is you're going to have, for customers outside the U.S., international customers, click here to pay. It's going to scream at the customer so that the international consumer is able to see this button, click on it, and move over into Bongo's environment. From this point in time, we will customize, again, this landing page. What the consumer is provided with is a copy of the items, the subtotal of those items, the shipping, the duties and the taxes, and the order total. This entire checkout can be translated into 16 different languages, and it's automatically done based on the user's browser settings. So if they're typically navigating the internet in German, the checkout environment will be in German for them. They can always change it back to English if they choose to, but the whole design and idea here around this localized checkout is to make sure that, the currency and the language is something that they're going to recognize and that they're going to feel comfortable with continuing through that checkout and through making payment. If you do have any specific restrictions, we can deny those items from being sold overseas. So again, if you have any items that may be hazardous, if you have any brands that can't be shipped overseas, those particular items will show an error message and automatically be removed from that particular user's shopping cart. So any of the items that they had in the shopping cart previously would still be there and they could still check out, but any of the restricted items would automatically be removed. So that way you don't have any return costs to move those products back from Bongo's facility back to your own. So some of the questions come up in terms of, well, how do we handle this from an operations perspective? And what's really unique about Bongo is that we go through a process of repackaging and consolidation. And I'm going to show you an example of what I mean by that and how it can be so beneficial to your consumers and to the cost of shipping these products internationally. As you can see here, we have 4 different items that got shipped through one of our retailers that moves product to us. And you'll see that there's all this excess packaging, if you will. It's a lot of empty space. When you ship products internationally, empty space costs a lot of money. It's not like a domestic shipment where you move it ground and the difference between a 5-pound shipment and a 6 or 7-pound shipment is very minimal or no difference in price at all. Internationally, it can be substantial. So what we do at Bongo is we will consolidate and we'll remove any of that excess packaging that's in there that's not needed. If it's an item that, like a chandelier or something that's very fragile, we're not going to remove that excess packaging. But for things that are not fragile, we will. And in this example, this box showed up, and it was a billable weight of 18 pounds based on the dimensions of the box that showed up at our facility. When it left our facility, it had a billable weight of 10 pounds. And this, what you have to understand here is that the 10-pound rate is based on the items inside that box. It's the weights and dimensions of the specific items. And that's how we calculate the price in the checkout. This customer would have paid 10 pounds for this box, even though the shipment showed up at our facility at 18 pounds. We ripped out that excess 18 pounds of billable weight so that nobody had to incur that additional cost. You, the merchant, nope, you didn't have to pay anything additional. The customer was never contacted to tell them they had to pay anything additional. It's the price that they were provided in the checkout of 10 pounds is the price that they paid, and that's the end-all price. So in this example, it was a reduction of 44%. And you can imagine that when you leverage this over the course of a lot of shipments, it saves a tremendous amount of money when shipping these products internationally, which is a costly endeavor for any of these consumers. We did an analysis on about 5,000 shipments through our facility, and on average, we saved 32% on billable weight. And there's a bunch of big names I'm sure everybody recognizes here, and you can kind of see what the reduction in billable weight was by merchant. And you can see how the boxes showed up in terms of their average weights, and then what those boxes looked like when they left our facility. So this is substantial, and again, it helps drive the cost down, which is ultimately going to help increase your conversion rates. One of the more challenging aspects of selling your products internationally is determining what's called an HS code, and it's a harmonized system code for the items that you sell. And what's difficult about it is how complex it is. And this code is what customs uses to determine duties and taxes for those particular items that were purchased when those items arrive in country. So what's uniformed across each country is these first 6 digits. This is what really determines the duty rate for that particular item, and then the VAT and taxes, obviously, from a country-by-country basis can be different. What's unique here, and you may not be able to see it great through the portal, but I'll read it to you, is that when you get down to this much detail, you'll be able to see that this specific example is other footwear incorporating a protective metal toe cap. And you can see that right here. That's the first 6 digits. Some countries, like the United States, want to further classify that. In the example of the United States, we want to know that that's welt footwear and that it's made with pigskin uppers. So what the United States does, they add additional digits onto the end of the HS code, and they call it a Schedule B number. And this is how the United States classifies these items, because there's a different duty rate for something that is welt footwear versus something that is not welt footwear. Conversely, Brazil, they're on an 8-digit framework, and you see there's just 2 zeros, basically stating that they don't care about what the differences are beyond the fact that it's other footwear incorporating a protective metal toe cap. So the reason that I bring this up is it's important to understand, but for every partnership that we start, we go through a very detailed catalog analysis for each merchant. We look and we assign in the correct HS code for every single item in your catalog. It takes Bongo a decent amount of time to do this, obviously depending on the SKU count, but it makes the calculation extremely accurate. And this is the reason that when you go out across the United States and you look at all the websites that are selling international, very, very few of them do this. Very few of them actually go through the process of understanding what the HS code is and provide an accurate duty and tax calculator. There are some merchants out there that have created kind of insurance models, but ultimately that's going to cost the consumer more money, again, increasing your abandonment rate when you're showing something that is at higher cost than what it really should be. From a service level perspective, you can start to get an idea of how Bongo operates. From a customer service perspective, we operate from 4 o'clock in the morning till 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We handle our live chats within 9 seconds during those hours. All of our phone calls, 90% of them are answered within 20 seconds. Any email or support questions are also handled within 24 hours. But really where I think we stand out even the most is within our operations. And what these statements mean down here is that when a package is received at Bongo's facility, within 4 hours of us receiving that package, we've done one of two things. We've either turned that entire shipment over to DHL, to FedEx, to UPS, because the order is complete and ready to be transported internationally, or we're putting those items on our shelves because we may be waiting for other items that are part of that same exact order. And what's unique there is, again, if you use drop shippers and you might have one order that has products coming from 2 different locations, we will wait and consolidate those items into one box or at least into one air bill, which again greatly reduces the international shipping costs. Pricing. Everybody always wants to know, well, what's this going to cost me to work with Bongo? And we love the question because the answer is free. Bongo makes our money on a margin on each shipment, so we really look at every relationship as a true partnership. We're one of DHL is our primary international vendor, and we're one of their largest accounts, so we get extremely aggressive shipping rates, and we disclose exactly what our rates are by weight and by country. So you can understand what those costs will be for each of your consumers depending on the size and weights of your products. So the service is free. We don't charge any sort of rev share or margin. You don't have to give us any sort of coupon codes to, in order to get a discounted rate. We don't do any of that. It's really a partnership. We go through some very detailed work in the front end to get those HS codes and to get your account set up. Typically takes anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, depending on how many SKUs you may have. But that's how we enter the relationship. And then the goal for us is to do everything we can to help you drive more transactions. Because if you're driving transactions, that means we're moving more freight, and that's where everybody wins. So from a pricing perspective, it's all free, but what's included is an express service from our facility around the globe. It's a 1 to 5 day transit, and we average 3 days around the globe. You get all the API technology that we've already integrated within 3dcart. So this is really all set up for you. You just have to basically raise your hand and say, I want to enable this. We handle all the receiving, the handling, the shipping of those products going outbound. So from a processing perspective, everything just becomes a domestic shipment for you, and Bongo's handling the more complex stuff. We also do ongoing classification. So as you have new items that come into your product catalog, you can feed those items over to us in an automated fashion through 3dcart, and we will classify those items as well to make sure that they're ready to be exported as well. I've kind of covered a bunch of these things in terms of the paperwork, customer service. Data refinement is kind of unique because if you don't know the weights and dimensions of the products that you sell, that's okay as well. what we'll do is we will identify weights and dimensions of comparable type products that we've moved in the past. But as those items get sold and they move into our facility, we actually put those items in a DIM scanner, and we learn about them. We learn about the items that you're selling, and we find out what is the real weight, what is the actual dimension of that product. And we update the database so that the next customer to buy that product has a much more refined shipping cost. And very likely over the course of time, that's going to allow your overall shipping costs to greatly decrease. We handle all the denied party screening just from a compliance perspective, making sure that you're not selling a product to a consumer overseas that's not allowed to transact with the United States. And then we proactively monitor and track every shipment that leaves our door to ensure that, if there are some sort of customs holdups, that we are on top of that before the customer complains about it. Obviously things that we can't control, but because of the fact that this is all we do, our paperwork is extremely clean, and it's very rare that we actually have holdups like that. From a pricing perspective, we make money on shipping, so what do we offer to the consumer? It's about 60 to 65% off of your typical common carrier rates. So I mentioned before, we get extremely deep discounted rates from the carriers. We pass the large majority of that on to the consumer because we certainly know this is very elastic. The lower the rate is for the consumer, the higher the conversion rate is going to be. So we're always working to move that further and further down the path so that you'll get the most optimal conversion rate. So it is about 60 to 65% off of UPS, FedEx, DHL type tariff rates. And that's going to include the fuel surcharge, which right now is around 15%. It also includes any accessorial fees, which internationally the most common one is to get it hit with a remote area fee, which is $20. And that can, again, greatly change the cost of a shipment going overseas if you get hit with a $20 fee. None of that will happen. You'll never be rebilled from Bongo for anything. Matter of fact, you'll never be billed for anything in the first place. And that price also includes all of our margin. So in summary, what does this really mean? It means you can increase your revenue literally overnight. You already have traffic that's coming to your site that's from international visitors that have found you organically. There's no reason that you should be turning those customers away when there's services like ours out there. So it's a free application. All you need to do is register right now through 3dcart. You do have to place a ticket within their customer service department in order to get this set up. They are working on getting the kind of admin tools in place so that you can just click a few buttons and be able to get this set up. But that's kind of soon to come. If you want to get set up for the holiday, we will have to go through the ticketing process. It is an integrated solution. It's a very seamless transition, which we work with you to make sure that that transition is as seamless as possible and that the checkout landing page is as customized as you want it to be. We want to make it, again, look like your site as much as possible. You get all the benefits of the localized transaction, full landed cost, the HS classification, the fact that this is a fraud-free service, again, is a huge benefit to anybody looking to expand internationally. A lot of different payment options depending on which one the consumer chooses, and then we have multiple payment options in terms of setting this up with the merchant. How do you get paid? Through the setup that we created with 3dcart, the most automated version of this is a solution that we call HTTP notifications, and that's what allows you to get your customer data immediately at the point in time of a sale. With that, we actually make payment to you once a week for all of the transactions of the previous week, and it's done through a bank ACH transfer, so that way you're not incurring that additional credit card transaction fee. It's just coming directly from bank to bank. You get the benefit of the repackaging services, which is, again, going to reduce the cost to the consumer and help increase that conversion rate. You get a very quick transit, on average of 3 days around the globe. And again, no change to your current operation. These get injected as just domestic orders. However, the unique component of that is that you will have your customer's information. You just won't have their financial information. We're obviously not allowed to pass back any sort of credit card information. But you will know who the customer is. You will know their email. You will have their phone information so that you can start that international database of your own. I know I have a tendency to talk pretty quick, so I went through a bunch of things, and I know there'll be a bunch of questions out there. So, Henry, I guess I'll pass it back to you so that we can start fielding some of the questions.
Great. Awesome product there. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here. First, let's get rid of the elephant in the room. Someone asked here if we have international checkout, can these work together?
Well, they don't necessarily work together, and I think if you attempted to put them together, you might confuse the consumer. But I think you really have to take a look at, what's going to work the best for your organization. And some of the kind of key differences between ourselves and international checkout, I hit on a few of them, but certainly I would say one of the most important is the fact that within their solution, they utilize that coupon code in order to get a discount on the product. So you're losing margin. And if you really look at that from a scale perspective, if your normal margin is 30% and you give up 10% of that to your international processor, you've effectively given up 33% of your margin. So you're giving up a third of your margin just to be able to allow them to transact these orders. So I think it's really important to understand that since this is a free service on Bongo's side, you're going to retain that additional, 1/3 of your margin. And that also carries out into why not use that coupon code to offer that to consumers. And you can do it whenever you want, however you want. Coupon codes will work with our service so that the price moves over into Bongo's environment after that coupon code has been applied. I think the other big benefit and difference between the two services is that our service is automated in the back-end functions of the service. So when an order is placed, you immediately get information about your customer. That order is immediately in your system. You have a lot of visibility. I mean, you really have full visibility to every order that goes through. Whether Bongo accepts that order or not, you'll have visibility to it. With International Checkout Solution today, the customer moves over into their environment and you lose control of it. You don't know who the customer is. You don't know if they did check out, if they didn't check out. You don't know what the number of days is in between the time that they checked out with them to the time that they placed that order on your site. So I think if you're looking for something that's going to be much more visible, and if margin is an important component of this transaction for you, that's really kind of the benefits of the Bongo solution. And I think you'd have to make a decision if one service is better than the other for you rather than using both services. Because again, if you have two, international checkout / international customers click here to pay buttons,
right,
I just think it can get too confusing for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another interesting question. Can you handle orders with as many as 50 small parts in a single plastic bag?
As many as 50 small parts in a single plastic bag? Yeah, absolutely. The obvious challenge with that is just making sure that we understand what the actual weights, or I should say if there's 50 small parts, they're probably fractional weights. What is the fractional weight of those items? And that's how we kind of virtually create the box, if you will. So we know there's 50 items and they're each, a tenth of a pound. We're able to calculate what the actual weight of that box or that bag is going to be. And then that's what the customer is going to pay. And then it's really up to us at Bongo to make sure that those items are shipped out effectively and in an effective manner, that Bongo's not going to lose any money, because obviously it's certainly not our goal.
Absolutely. Here's another question. If I implement Bongo Checkout, can an international customer choose between Bongo and other international shipping methods? Can I still offer United States Postal Service First Class International, for example? I would assume yes, because it's all triggered by them clicking on the Bongo Checkout button itself. But if they followed through the whole checkout process, they could still go with the alternate methods, correct?
Well, it can get a little confusing if you go that approach, and you wouldn't be able to get the benefits of the checkout solution with those other types of services. So if you ship with the post office today, for example, you're not going to be able to do the landed cost calculation and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. If it's set up within 3dcart as a button, and the customer moves through to the checkout, and you've got the, say, USPS offered there, then arguably, yeah, you could go through that process of allowing that. to be completely honest with you, we put so much work into the front end of these that we really look to be the exclusive provider on the international orders, simply because there's so much front end work for us that we don't want to be in a situation where we put hundreds of hours into the implementation of these services and then not get the orders because the customers move through just through a postal stream, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Here, let's see. We've got another one. Do you support fractional quantities?
Fractional quantities. I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest with you.
Well, sometimes, let's see if I can get a good example. Usually we see fractional quantities as far as textiles, 3.5 feet instead of 4 feet. But I'm trying to think of a more substantial, perhaps hardware. Sometimes they have different sizes of lengths of cable or something like that. I believe that's what the gentleman is referring to.
I think, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think it really comes down to, is there a different SKU for each of those products? So if you've got, if you've got different size items, I would assume that each of them have their own SKU. Therefore, we will classify each of those SKUs and be able to understand what the weights and dimensions of them are based on those differences between each. If it comes down to things like if you're selling, apparel, different colors, different sizes, again, I mean, we can manage all of that through the system very easily.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I answered the question correctly or not, but maybe that individual can resubmit and get some clarity.
Okay, perfect. Going down the list here. Let's see. Here's one I can answer right now. Please repeat exact steps to sign up through 3dcart. Right now we're working on an actual integration method where you can do it all through your admin panel. But in the meantime, you can sign up for it through our 3dcart App Store. If you go to the main 3dcart webpage, over at the top left-hand side, there should be a navigation menu. When it drops down, you'll see an App Store in there, and the BongoCheckout option is listed under the Shipping tab, and you'll be able to sign up for the service there. And right now, it's not quite automated, but we're working towards that. So we'll do it manually for you.
And I'll add to that, Henry, as well. For anybody that wants to get set up, there is setup that needs to take place on Bongo's side as well. As you can imagine, we need to get the product catalog. We need to have some conversations around what that classification work is going to look like. We also have to get the landing page set up, things of that nature. So there's work to be done on Bongo's side even before you actually try and set up through 3dcart, because you won't be able to get through the 3dcart setup without having a few of those key components on the Bongo side. So ideally is go through the App Store, place a request, and one of the Bongo account reps will reach out direct, or again, they can come to us directly as well through the bongous.com website.
All right, there's actually a kind of a related question as far as setup goes. If we have 38,000 SKUs, how long would it take to get up and running?
Normally, for about 38,000, I'd say it's probably going to be about 3 weeks. To be completely honest, right now we're being bombarded with everybody who's trying to cram it in before the holiday. So we're doing our best to try and still meet that. But typically, for that type of of SKU count, we're probably looking at about 3 weeks.
Okay. Here's a good one. Doesn't Bongo have a service where an international customer can sign up for an individual account directly through Bongo? What would be the advantage of using BongoCheckout versus allowing the individual to simply use their Bongo account? Do they pay about the same amount, for example? I believe.
Sure. No, great question.
Okay.
Great question. That's what we call our Bongo Extend solution, and that's, if you've seen Bongo in the past, there's a very high likelihood that you've seen us on a website, and that was the application where the consumer can register for a U.S. address. And there's some benefits from a consumer perspective to that service, which is, I might buy and I'm just going to make things up here, but I might buy some apparel through one website, I might buy some sporting goods through another website, and I might go out to eBay and buy some products off eBay. And the benefit of the consumer service is that I now can take those 3 different purchases from 3 different vendors and consolidate them at Bongo's facility before it gets shipped overseas, so I can leverage the weight and the dimensions of those items to reduce my shipping cost. In terms of the conversion rates, what we've seen is BongoCheckout has a tendency to convert quite a bit better because there's no registration process for the consumer. So on average, we're seeing about a 400% increase in conversions through BongoCheckout than we did through Extend. Obviously, with Checkout, there's quite a bit more integration work that has to be done, whereas Extend is just a great solution for anybody that's looking to really just get up and running really quick, possibly even somebody who has a tremendous amount of SKUs and they want to just get up and running for the holiday season. That's another solution that we're already enabled for on 3dcart.
Cool. Here's one. Same gentleman asking a follow-up questions. So you have to go through our catalog and assign numbers to each of our items for duties and taxes. So what's the process every time we start carrying a new item? You mentioned ongoing classifications, but tell me how involved this process is.
Sure. Right as of today, you'd have to upload any of those new SKUs to Bongo. We're working with the folks at 3dcart to automate that process. Hopefully that will be complete within the coming weeks, possibly the next 2 months. Obviously, with it being such a a big season for everybody, I certainly anticipate that to be complete by the end of the year. But what that will do is any new products that get uploaded into your 3dcart admin will automatically be pushed over to Bongo, and it'll queue us to classify those items. So that entire process will be automated eventually.
Cool, cool. I lost my window with all the questions here. Bear with me. Okay, someone asking for clarification about custom forms. So I do not have to worry about custom forms myself when using Bongo. I guess I'm not clear on that part.
Yep, not at all. So we handle all of the creation of the commercial invoice. If there's any sort of shipper's export declarations, we're creating those. Specifically challenging is creation of certificates of origins, especially within the EU. Anytime you're sending textiles into the EU, you have to have a certificate of origin on every one of those shipments. We're handling all of that. You don't have to send us a thing. Since we already know what the product is at the point in time that it's going through our checkout, our system has automated all of those processes. So it comes in, we're handling all the paperwork.
Awesome. And let's see, one more question here. Do I have to have an account with DHL to use your service? I would imagine not. It's because it's being shipped from you guys.
Correct. Yeah, there's no need for an account with any of the carriers outside of you getting the product to our facility. And one of the questions we get a lot is, who picks up the cost of shipping that product from my distribution facility to Bongo's facility in Connecticut? And that's a decision that you can make yourself as well in terms of what you want to charge the customer for that. Some merchants we work with, they eat that cost themselves, and other merchants say, I want the consumer to pay that cost. And you can do that. So you can set that up through 3dcart to tell us what the cost of that domestic transportation is going to be, and that will get added on to the international shipping cost to the consumer, and that cost will be paid back to you as the merchant.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. Who handles questions regarding the purchase? Customer support?
Yep, another great question. It really depends on what the question is. If the customer is asking questions around payment or around the transportation of the goods, typically they're going to come to Bongo directly. If they're asking questions about the product, about warranties, things of that nature, they're typically going to go directly to the merchant. And again, if we get a call that's about, or we get a live chat or an email and it's about the product, we are going to defer the customer back to you. Each merchant does have visibility to that unified tracking link that I was talking about before. So you will have the ability to track the shipments as the merchant. So if it is a logistical question, usually the merchant can resolve that question or the concern from the consumer. But if for some reason a product gets stuck in customs and there's additional work that needs to be done, then obviously we'd want that inquiry to come over to Bongo and we'd handle that for you.
Okay. One question from the Too Good to Be True department here, which I'm on his same team here. To further clarify, how do you make your money?
Yeah, great question. It's all built into the shipping costs. So you know, it's really just leveraging our volume to get extremely deep discounted rates. And as probably everybody on this call knows or can at least understand, is that international orders, international shipments are extremely profitable for the carriers. And so what that allows for is allows us to get extremely deep discounts, you know, much deeper than what people are commonly associating with domestic shipments, with ground shipments, with air shipments domestically. There's a lot more leverage with international shipments. So we get very, very deep discounts, and that's what allows us to pass that 60 to 65% discount onto, you know, these consumers, and we still make our margin in there.
Awesome. And looks like we have just a couple of last questions here. Actually, I want to know this answer. What do you do if the customer wants to return an item?
It doesn't happen. I'll throw that out there, but great question. We get it all the time. And you do have to think about it, the amount of returns that you'll get will be substantially less internationally, simply because the onus of the transportation is on the consumer. So they pay to ship the product overseas. Unless that item is really a high-value item, it's very likely not coming back to the United States because the consumer has to pay for that transport. But if they decide that they do want to return an item, they communicate that directly with Bongo. We provide the price of the return, and it would go directly back to whatever your return facility is. So we abide by whatever your normal domestic policy is, which in most cases means the consumer needs to get in touch with the merchant and get whatever return authorization process normally takes place. So if it's an RMA number or if it's some other process that they have in place, they go through that process. They come to Bongo. We provide them all of the necessary paperwork to get that product back into the United States, and the paperwork is designed so that nobody has to pay any additional duties and taxes when that product is moved back to the U.S. But there's really no need for Bongo to be involved in the logistical component of that, because it doesn't need to come to our facility to go to yours. It might as well come from, you know, Australia directly back to your facility. It cuts out a lot of the cost. So we'll facilitate it, but again, we don't see it. I mean, it's extremely rare.
Excellent. And just got one last question. I'm surprised this question wasn't asked earlier. Will there be a replay? Yes. We've been recording our webinars lately, so what we'll do is as soon as I can get the video converted, it'll be on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/3dcart. So it should be up there soon, hopefully, as long as I don't have any problems converting it. And let's see, one more here. Here's an interesting one. Do you have any size or weight limitations?
No, no size or weight limitations. One of the, again, another benefit of the service. We've moved, you name it, we've moved it. We move kayaks almost every single week. We move 60-inch televisions almost every single week. Actually, almost every day on the TVs. We move quite a bit of those. We move sofas, car bumpers, you name it. We move it, and a lot of people are amazed. And I think this is actually an important point to make. You know, a lot of these products are moving through an air service, and we have the common misconception in the United States that I would never pay more for the shipping of an item than I would for the item itself. And a perfect example of this is we had a customer of ours who was in Australia, and he bought a jogging stroller. And he paid $350 for the jogging stroller, and it cost $400 to ship the thing to Australia. And again, everybody thought, well, that's kind of crazy. The guy sends us an email, and he just thanked us profusely because of the fact that he could buy the exact same stroller right down the street at a retailer in Australia for $1,400. So he paid essentially $750 for the product and for the shipping of the product, and essentially saved over 40% of what he could have purchased that item down the street for. So, we always kind of look at things that way. It's not the right way to look when you're selling internationally. It's amazing what people will do. We see some people that buy $5 items and pay $30 to ship them. It happens all the time. So, yes, no limitations on weights or dimensions.
Awesome. Okay, it looks like we just have a little bit of time left. Here's an interesting one. If customers have their own Bongo accounts, I'm assuming he's meaning the Bongo Extended, can they combine checkout orders with orders from other merchants?
No, they cannot. That is something that, and I'll clarify that. Usually our Bongo U.S. consumers that have their own U.S. address, even with the BongoCheckout application, they're not going to click on that application. They're going to go through your regular checkout channels, and they're going to check out with the U.S. address so that they can still take advantage of that consolidation. But if they check out through BongoCheckout, it's going to be, that's an automated process. So as soon as that order is complete in our facility, it's immediately being shipped to them, and they're prepaying all of the, obviously, the shipping and the duties and taxes for it.
Gotcha. All right, last question, and if I miss anyone, I humbly apologize. It's just that the GoToMeeting interface itself is kind of cumbersome when you get so many questions coming in. But what we usually do is at the end of the webinar, we download all of the questions, and any of the ones we missed, we'll try to get you an answer as quickly as possible. So the question I have here, tell me about the process of refunding a customer that claims the package never arrived.
Okay. Well, obviously, we're going to do our research on that. We're going to look through the I should back up, actually. Since everything's going through a common carrier, everything does get a proof of delivery. So nothing's going to be going through like a postal stream where there's just a delivery confirmation. Everything does get a signature. So we'd be able to prove if indeed that did arrive, it did not arrive. In the rare instance that you might have somebody who says, well, I didn't actually sign for it, but we do have a signature on file, then ultimately that becomes Bongo's responsibility to work out that scenario with the carrier to find out what's going to happen with that particular shipment. Is the carrier going to stand behind it, or is it something that ultimately Bongo would lose? But since we take on all claims and all losses or damages, that's all built into the system, and we've got an extremely quick SLA on our claims and losses, which is within 5 business days. We either have those items repurchased at the merchant or refunded to the consumer.
Excellent. Cool. Well, unfortunately, it looks like we're getting out of time here, but as I mentioned, we do have this recorded, so we'll have it on our YouTube channel shortly, and we'll also download any of the questions we may have missed. I want to thank you guys for joining us today, Greg and Greg. We didn't hear from the other Greg, but glad.
I talk a lot. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. But I'm really impressed with the software, and I was really happy to see the presentation. I want to thank you guys sincerely, and for anyone who's interested, just there was one question I saw earlier: how to sign up for BongoCheckout. To clarify how to sign up. We're working on having it in the 3dcart admin, but in the meantime, what you can do is you can go to 3dcart.com. I have the web page right in front of me, so I can just read this off to you. At the top right where it says e-commerce, you hover your mouse over there and go to the App Store. And once you're in the 3dcart App Store, look for the tab labeled Shipping. And BongoCheckout should be there on the bottom right. And that's how you'll be able to sign up for the service. It'll actually get you contacted by Bongo, and we'll do everything manually on our end until we can get the automation done on the 3dcart admin. So thanks, guys, for the presentation. It looks awesome. It really does. I'm very, very impressed, and I think a lot of our users, based on some of these questions here, are pretty impressed too. So thanks again.
Absolutely. We really appreciate the time and effort, and look forward to speaking to everybody.
All right. Thanks a lot, and everyone, have a great day.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.